They say the truth hurts, so you about to feel pain, and I gotta do work, God said I gotta do work, cause it's off with the name, savage truth, savage truth, it's the savage truth, the savage truth, the savage.
This is the Savage Truth, and I am your host, Pastor Roy Dockery. Thank you for joining us again today for another episode, and I want to jump right into it and then just kind of, take a step forward real quick. So June, like all of the episodes that I drop in June, are going to be tied to the idea of what I've been calling Black Father's Day since the beginning of 2022, right? So this year in 2022, Father's Day lands on Sunday, June 19th, which also lands on Juneteenth, right? A celebration for Black liberation, post-emancipation proclamation, and all that good stuff. If you don't know what Juneteenth is, please go look it up. For you that work for new startup companies and you get the day off, please go understand why you have the day off. And not just celebrate it as a holiday like some people do for Memorial Day or Labor Day when we don't really know what it is, and it's just a free day off of work. So what I want to encourage you to do is to go look up June 19th. And so for me, the overlap this year, the fact that June 19th, a celebration of Black liberation and like a very transformative moment in American history, also overlaps with the day that we celebrate fathers. So I've been dubbing this day Black Father's Day since I came to the conclusion that that's what was happening, and made sure that my family understood that this is a day where you have to celebrate Black fathers to the umpteenth degree, right? So it's like and I've been saying, when your birthday falls on Christmas, don't just act like it's Christmas, right? You better double celebrate, right? When my birthday falls on Thanksgiving, it better be some pies, turkeys, and some cake, right? So we got to layer that. So for everybody out there, and I said it before, anybody who's raising Black children, I don't care what the race of the father is. If you're a white man, Hispanic man, and you are participating in the raising of Black children, if you adopted Black children, I don't care. But if you're the father of young Black men and women, right, then I want you to be highlighted and celebrated because you're contributing to the future, right, of Black images. You're contributing to the future of Black history, regardless of what your color is, right? Like, you can't have a lot of conversations even around Black history without talking about people who are not Black, because there are people that helped us forward that and move that story forward. And I think the same is true for the parents of minority children who happen to be of the majority culture, right? So this first episode that I'll release for June is going to actually be more about an experience and an individual than about Black fathers in general, because I'm going to talk about Jean-Michel Basquiat, who is back here. For people who don't notice, my Funko Pop thing keeps extending. So this is Basquiat Funko Pop that my wife got me. My wife had a wonderful idea, and she was like, man, like, you've got there's this Basquiat exhibit that's opening in New York in the spring. And so behind my back, I did not know, but she approached the family and the exhibit about us basically, or about me going to the exhibit and basically taking some photos, shooting some video, and then doing a podcast episode for like the Black Father's Day dynamic, just because talking about legacy and significant Black men, right, on the podcast. And so I was like, you know what, that's an awesome idea. And my best friend's a film director and a videographer, so she had it kind of coordinated, like, okay, like, well, like, he can go with you, and then we can, you can get all of this stuff worked out, and it'll be cool, and it'll be really something really, really nice for your podcast. And I thought about it, I was like, yeah, that would be good, but more than anything, right? Like, and I've been traveling significantly for work because I got a new job and, all of this other stuff. So I'm like, well, you know what? Like, why don't you come with me, right? So, this, a little while ago, me and my wife, journeyed to New York City for the weekend, did a lot of awesome stuff. You can see the image here, right? This is us standing at the entrance of the Basquiat exhibit in Chelsea, New York, where, it's kind of like a one-way directional path that you walk through the museum. And you get to see probably like over 200 pieces of art that have never been displayed. So kind of prior to going to the King Pleasure exhibit, which is a name given from one of Basquiat's pieces of artwork, it was kind of interesting to look at some of the background, right? So Basquiat was born in Brooklyn in 1980. His mother's Puerto Rican, his dad was Haitian, and he's like one of three children. He has two sisters as well, and they're first generation immigrants. So their dad's from Haiti, their mom's from Puerto Rico. And their dad was relatively strict, right? And I know their parents separated. Their dad actually lived in Puerto Rico for a while on contract because he immigrated to the United States at the age of 17 from Haiti because he wanted to be a businessman, right? He had dreams of being an American businessman and building a legacy for his family. And there was just one thing when you look at the storyline of the Basquiat family, right? Whether it's Gerard Basquiat, which is his dad, or his sisters, and his mom, and like everyone had this focus and this attention around legacy, right? And so even when you look at the brand for the Savage Truth, or the brand for me specifically, right, it's impact, impress, and imprint. And that's because we're talking about like the lasting imprint that you leave on people, but ultimately it's talking about legacy. Like, what is your legacy? And so from a Black Father's Day perspective, like looking at Gerard Basquiat, especially after his son's tragic death from a drug overdose in 1988, he went through painstaking effort to preserve his son's legacy, right? Which is interesting because Basquiat moved out of the house in 1978 when he was only probably either at 18 or approaching 18 years old, because his father didn't really get the, graffiti artist, you want to be an artist for a living. His dad was like, look, you got to go get this money the regular way, right? Like, you're a Black man in America, right? Of, mixed culture. We're in New York, like, it kind of, probably like most dads do, right? Intentionally or unintentionally, trying to ground our children's dreams. Especially when you're talking about in the 70s and in the 80s, when you think about the prevalence of racism and discrimination, right? Like, there's things in the bio that his family released, right? That like, he was one of the most famous artists in the world and still couldn't catch a taxi in New York City, right? So with that, like, that was his dad's concern. So after they had moved to Puerto Rico for a couple of years because their father was on contract. Their father actually largely raised them. When you look at the story, they don't talk a lot about his mother in any negative context, but you see that like their dad had custody of them, right? So that even in the 80s, right, that's and in the 70s, that's not normal. It's not typical for a man to raise their children. That's still not typical now, that if you have a separation, even from a court system perspective, basically, the court system leans towards the mother as a default, right? So you see that that Basquiat was being raised by his father Gerard, right? And they went from Puerto Rico, they came back to Brooklyn, and then right around 18 in 1978, the son, Basquiat moved out and was like, hey, I'm gonna go figure out what my path is. I want to do art, and he kind of stepped out on his own, and it did put tension on their relationship, right? So he leaves the house in 1978. And by 1982, he's one of the most prominent artists in the world, right? He's one of the youngest artists put on display in Germany in 1982, right? He's in the New York, he's got section in New York Times. He's friends with like Andy Warhol, right? Like, his name is in the rooms where it happens, right? To use a Hamilton reference. And so that was a crazy dynamic that just within 4 years of stepping out on his own, especially when the art field is so elitist, right? Like, as far as gaining access and the ways that you get into shows and all of this other stuff, there's a lot of things you have to navigate. So for him to be able to build a reputation within 4 years, especially with the style of art that was kind of more urban, graffiti-ish paint, right? You couldn't really put a category on it. It wasn't abstract. It wasn't cubism, right? It wasn't realism. Like, it was just Basquiat, right? It was kind of this graffiti thoughts, poetry, social commentary. Some of the work that he did was just amazing. And a lot of it was like, it looked unfinished, but it was finished because it was just like it was almost like an expression of thought through art in very dynamic ways, right? So for him to leave home in 1978, for him to strike fame and notoriety by 1982, but then to die by 1988, I'm sure was painful for his sister, for his mother, for his father. And so there's some criticism about it to a certain degree, because one of the reasons Basquiat isn't very prevalent in the art world is because his dad kind of kept a very, very tight lid on his legacy, on his artwork, on who had rights to utilize his name. Because obviously, when this young black man died of a drug overdose, the media wasn't very kind to him, right? Especially the art establishment, right? Kind of looking at him as somebody that was just in it for the money, or kind of taking advantage of it because he was non-traditional, because he was, in the punk rock scene and in the hip hop scene, that he was around rappers and he was around rock stars, that he partied with celebrities. So he didn't really fit the mold of a traditional artist in that time. So it's kind of like his father tried to protect his legacy from being denigrated by what happened in his death, right? So you don't really see, right? Like, until very recently, you didn't see a lot of branded Basquiat things. You didn't see Basquiat shower curtains and t-shirts at Gap and Old Navy. And the reason you had that difference, because up until the point when Gerard Basquiat died in 2013, he kept a pretty close lid on the things that were happening. Like, a lot of Basquiat's art wasn't even sold, right? It was just kind of preserved from a legacy perspective. So it wasn't until 2013 when his sisters took over the estate of Basquiat after their father's passing. And then over the years, Lassane, I don't know if I'm saying her name right, and Janine Basquiat, and Janine's last name is now, it looks like Heriveau. It looks French-ish, Haitian-ish. And their stepmother, Nora Fitzpatrick, which was Gerard Basquiat's wife around the time that he passed, like, they were able to kind of step in and then say, okay, what do we want to do with his legacy, right? Because their father, right, and as father should, right, he wanted to protect it. He didn't want people to misuse or to to take advantage of his son's legacy. And I mean, and willingly, and understandably so. But the other thing is when his sisters came in and his stepmom came in, they were like, but there's so much about him that people didn't understand, right? So, and it's just that different dynamic, right, between a mother and a father, right? The father's trying to protect, and the sisters and the stepmother want people to understand, right? And understanding requires some transparency. Understanding requires some visibility. So they started working towards, and I believe even the idea for this exhibit came about in 2017, and wasn't really realized until early spring of this year in 2022, that they wanted to show people who he was, right? They wanted to have multimedia representation. They wanted to have his paintings, his drawings. There's illustrations that he did in the school newspaper, right? There's artifacts that he collected and things that just kind of help you see. And they describe it as like an intertwining of his artistic endeavors in his personal life. So to blend those together, like even in the middle of the exhibit, they have the Grace Jones Studios, right? Which is where he worked. And they said when he worked, he would have music playing. He would have a TV on. So they've got like his VHS tapes of the things that he would watch. And he'd have multiple paintings like around. He'd have some on the wall, some would be on the floor, some would be stretched out on canvas. And instead of using traditional wood canvases, he would use, metal frames, like he's painted on people's fences and refrigerator doors and bodega doors and, and all of this stuff. And it was just like trying, like kind of allow you to get into his mind, to understand, first of all, like the way that his artistic expression was derived, but more so they wanted you to understand him as a person. Right. So like dad was protecting of him. Right. Dad was covering of him. And then his sisters. Right. Kind of even carrying on, and his stepmother in that legacy of like the nurturing aspect of a mom and, their mothers as well. But it was like we also want his nieces and his nephews to understand we want the world to understand who he is, because it's not just his art that's important. It's who he was and how that art came out of his existence and the reality of who he was. That's important. Right. So when we talk about legacy, and even as far as fathers being present and, as whatever people would call the traditional family setting, like there's an importance of having a balance between like that father's energy and a mother's energy. Right. Because dad may be protective. Dad may be defensive. Right. Dad may even go on the offense. But when it comes to nurturing and transparency and understanding, like you need that balance. right? And even when you talk about present being the new normal, like, his dad was present, his dad was there, but it was almost like he was overly present, right? He was overly protective, and not nurturing from a dream perspective. So like Basquiat actually had to leave home and then had to be out in the world without the protection of a father because he didn't feel like his father, right, like kind of understood and agreed with that. And then it put him around people that exposed him to things that he was vulnerable to, right? And then, and then dealing with the addiction and whatever wound up ending his life when he was only 28 years old. So it's like, and so I can understand the reaction, right? The protectiveness of the dad that was like, okay, like, like that, like people took my son from me and I'm not going to let them take his image and his legacy as well. So in that balance, I think it's amazing the way that the family has now come and, and you can be immersed in Basquiat, right? Like you can have a figure, an African-American figure in history that I can point my children to, that we can point non-traditional artists to, right? And then also an example, right, of self-control, right, of trying to stay away from those things that could look beneficial, could look fun, but ultimately can be dangerous and can end our lives and take people way too soon. So in that, like I said, the concept of legacy, just the idea of legacy that's like wrapped in to it, right? And you're seeing videos from his sisters and his uncles and his cousins and then his nieces and his nephews, and then you see the paintings that Andy Warhol did of his mother and his father and like his family, like one of the world's most famous artists he had that close of a relationship with, that he's basically doing portraits of your family that are probably now worth millions and millions of dollars. And it's the impact that he had. It's the impact that he had on pop culture, the impact that he had even on hip hop culture and nightlife in New York City, right? And just the expression of what like a young black man could be, the expression of the fact that graffiti could be accepted as fine art, right? That graffiti style art could be accepted as fine art. Because if you look at a Picasso painting, right, like I'm sure at the time people were like, this person is insane, right? But it's the people who challenge those boundaries and then basically leave a lasting imprint, right? I always talk about impact, impress, imprint. All of those things are on the website merch, by the way, in the description below. But yeah, like it's leaving that imprint and then how that imprint moves forward. So I'm thankful, right, that the estate has kind of opened that up, because I think it's a beautiful thing to see. I think it's a beautiful experience to have with the King Pleasure exhibit in New York. And it's in Chelsea, New York, for those that are kind of afraid of regular New York, at least it's Chelsea. You don't have to be that worried. But I'm only going to go through like a couple of quick pictures because I want you to experience it. If you want to see more images of the Basquiat exhibit and museum, join the Discord. I'm actually going to set up a channel in my Discord that basically shares all the Basquiat images that we have, but I'm not going to put them out publicly because I would prefer for you to go experience it. It's not that, most of the people in the country, if you got to come from the West Coast, I'm sorry, but it's New York. You can get cheap flights into New York City. The exhibit isn't that bad. If you can get like skip the line, you can get skip the line pricing or skip the line tickets. They're like $65 per person. It's in Chelsea, nice area. You can go visit the High Line and the Chelsea Market, go take a tour of Brooklyn, whatever you want to do. But, go on Broadway. Me and my wife went to go see Lion King because she's wanted to see that for a long time. Just make it a weekend, make it an experience, right? Because that's the one thing that I'm trying to focus on as well. So when it comes to the things that you do as a family, when it comes to the things that you do with your wife, like focus on experiences, not just gifts, not just tangible things. Tangible materialistic things tend to fade very quickly, but the experiences and the memories of those experiences last forever. So that's what I would encourage you to do. So let's take a look at some photos real quick of a few things. Like I said, this is me and my wife at the entrance here. The people were kind enough. That is a Basquiat shirt that I have on, even though people at the exhibit thought I had on Basquiat pants. I did not, but I do have on Basquiat Converses, which you can't see in this, but there is video on that. So this is actually the portrait by Andy Warhol of Basquiat. I believe this is probably around 1982 is when he started doing like this hairstyle with the dreadlocks and the dynamic. But this is like a silk screen print painted by Andy Warhol. Boxio. So his dad was really into boxing. And so you see like the introduction of what they call like the humble crown icon here, which is just this 3-point crown figure. He got a line through the Coronas because his dad liked to drink Coronas while he watched boxing. And so this, it almost looks graffiti-ish, but this is like art on acrylic. And the one thing that I thought was really interesting, these are the portraits of his family members. I believe that's his grandmother, his mother, and his father that Andy Warhol did, that are on exhibit in Chelsea as well. And then here's some more of his art here, just to showcase some of the different styles, just some different faces. And a lot of his stuff has like names on it and words and ideas or adjectives. And then they're crossed out. So it's like almost a process of like working through his mind when you're looking at a lot of his artwork. This is another piece here. A lot of his pieces feature skulls. You also see in the background right here, you still see this the 3-point crown, which they call the humble crown. You have this here. I love some of these in the exhibit because there was a lot of his artwork where he used non-traditional framing, or he used a fence or anything like that. So this is actually like a metal structure with canvas stretched across it. And then he was using like twine to actually stretch the canvas out evenly, and then painting on like these metal frames instead of on just perfectly square or rectangular wrapped canvases. So even like the ruggedness of the framing that he used for a lot of his art was amazing. And it's just, again, like the graffiti style, the bright colors, like the disproportions and all of that other stuff is something that's been, that's recognized now as wonderful art. There's 2 pieces of art, my beautiful wife and the mandrill monkey here, that you see behind her. This is like one of his largest pieces that I believe was actually given to his stepmom by his father. It was one of the few things that were kind of like out in the market that wasn't in like a private estate collection. But it is a huge piece, like a big yellow canvas, with the mandrill monkey there. This is one thing I'm talking about. This is like a refrigerator. This is just a refrigerator door that he painted and then kind of carved the word love out of. This is on the floor of the studio. And it's just a painting on like a sheet of paper, like the Achilles. So it's basically like depicting the anatomy of the human foot. He did a lot of anatomy stuff. He would have like a drawing of a spleen or a pancreas or a lung or a heart, and then he would just be naming all the parts of it, almost like he was doing like a expanded anatomy drawing. This is another one of those, just a couple of different pieces of art that were laying in the makeshift studio that they set up to represent the studio that he had in Brooklyn. Another, representation of the 3-point crown there. This is one of the paintings, the Thor painting, again with the crown on it, and this really cool jacket that was there. I guess that was one of his pieces of clothing that was in his studio. Here's another 3-point crown that's on like a piece of acrylic and then painted, and then he basically scratched out. You've got like a bunch of words and phrases and thoughts here, and then he had the crown and then some additional paint that he put on top of that as well. Here's just another painting, and again you see it says soup to nuts, Fox, 1830, turn back the clock. And they're just thoughts, right? They're thoughts that he puts like in comparison. Then you also see here, there's kind of like almost like there's a face, but then you see there's a 3-point crown here in the face. And then here's another like kind of anatomy representation, right? Like this is a human body. Like these are the large and small intestines here, that he was just drawing out and throwing it out there. Like this is, death of Marat, right? But you see aluminum, borax, urine, fermentation, zinc, sand, and again, right, just thoughts, right? Thoughts and structures. And a lot of this stuff is untitled, unknown. This as well. This is another piece that's in the exhibit. I can't see the name of that one there. And then we've got another one kind of on like a makeshift metal frame here. And it was, and this one's called Woman by Her Neck. So this is like a illustration of somebody grabbing a woman by the neck. And then you've got like a crest of arms, and some other things here that are painted. A lot of times he use mixed medium. He'll take like an old picture and then put that on the canvas and then paint around it. Right. You've got the humble crown again here. And then, you know, brand new versus, versus whatever, money, dollars and cents. And so just a really cool kind of abstract way that he put that together from an art perspective. You got Edgar and Jupiter, the study of four heads you see up there. 7 layers of skin, lower teeth structure. So there's always like these like anatomical, like scientific, like earth science kind of illustrations in a lot of the work as well. This is at the end of the exhibit, and this was actually a proclamation for like Basquiat Day in the city of Brooklyn. So that's the key to the city of Brooklyn. Like this was a huge display that I believe they pulled in from the Palladium. Like there was this giant, you can kind of see some of it here, but this was like this thing was probably 30 or 40 foot long painting that that Basquiat did at the Palladium nightclub in their VIP area. And this is after, going through the tour, me and my wife kind of going over by the river and just kind of hanging out. And then you can see as we were exiting, the brother in security hooked us up. He gave us some Basquiat stamps with the humble crown. This immediately created a stir in my Discord community because people thought Pastor Roy and Lady Keena got new tattoos. But they were stamps. They did wash off. But that would be a cool tattoo though. I don't know. But I'm indecisive. I might like, I don't know if I like things that much for a significant period of time. So again, the women behind it, right, are his sisters, Lisanne and Janine, right? So these are the women now who are responsible for basically curating and managing the legacy of Basquiat. And it is probably one of the like largest private collections. I mean, because there's like pieces of paper in there that are worth $45,000 just because. So like I have no idea what the total value of the art is in that collection. But I'm pretty sure it's the largest and most valuable collection owned by a Black family in the world, right? From an estate perspective, when you talk about fine art. I know there was a piece of art that was sold and it broke records recently, right? I think it was 110 or 120 million dollars that one of Basquiat's pieces sold for. So when you look at the amount of stuff that's on this in this exhibit, like if it starts selling into collections and through galleries and all this other stuff, from a legacy perspective, it's definitely driving a difference for generations of people in the Basquiat family, right? And creating like wealth that's sustainable, right? That Rockefeller kind of wealth, right? Where you got money because your granddaddy's cousin's third cousin had money and everybody's still sustained off of the creative genius of an individual who didn't even get to have children, who didn't get married, right? And who basically poured all of his early life into creating something that would have a lasting imprint for the world. So that's the information I have to share. Again, this is the King Pleasure exhibit in Chelsea, New York. You can find it if you just, if you type in Jean-Michel Basquiat, right? You'll pull up their website. You'll see the King Pleasure exhibit right there. It is a great place to go visit. Wonderful part of New York City to go spend some time in. Take an Uber wherever you gotta go. Don't take the little ride around carts, the little bicycle carts. They look cute, but they be trying to charge you like $7 per minute per person, right? So they don't tell you until after you get to moving. So don't get got by the carts. I've seen people get got before. They tried to get me and I was like, nah, bro, I'm giving you $50. That's what you get for them 10 minutes that we just, I'm not charging you double. Me and my wife are one individual. So that's all I had to share with that. Like I said, hope y'all enjoyed that. I hope you go look more in depth into Jean-Michel Basquiat, their family, right? The legacy. And if you get a chance, right, for husbands out there, if you want to take dad somewhere, if you want to have a wonderful experience with the family, like go do something, right? Go experience something and try to experience something that has a tie to Black culture, right? To Black history. Right, like this, it's a month about Black fathers and Black liberation. So have some experience to celebrate the persistence of the creativity and the ingenuity and the resilience of Black Americans, of immigrants who became classified as Black Americans. Right, like my father came from Jamaica when he was 12 or 13 years old. Right, so my dad is me and my brother are technically like first generation Jamaicans, because my father was not born here, right? He immigrated to the U.S. So I understand it, right? I know the very conservative nature and the kind of focus on education and career and business that immigrants have, right? They don't really relate to the artsiness, to the creative, right? Like they understand processes and hard work and you know and kind of making your own lane, but parallel to what's already there, right? Building it out for yourself and for your community and for the generations to come. So I've got a lot of appreciation for it. I see it in my own family, definitely see it in the Basquiat family. So I wish them well with the resort, with the exhibit. I really appreciate them allowing us to have a press pass, as much information that they shared with us. You know, I would have copped some more stuff in the bookstore, but I was out of larges, you know, and the brother is way too tall. But I did get my mandrel shirt. I'll be rocking that, and I've already probably bought every pair of Basquiat sneakers I can get my hands on to support the brand and the estate. But thank you for what you're doing with Janine and Lisanne, of sharing your brother with the world, right? Sharing his heart, sharing his passion, sharing his art, so that people can have a greater understanding of who he is, and that can inspire people to be individuals and know that even as being an individuals, you can have an impact and have the ability to change the world, whether it's the art world, if it's the sports world, if it's the entertainment world, if it's the business world, just to encourage people to know that you don't have to be traditional, but you can be transformative. So thank you for your time. I appreciate y'all joining me today. Continue to get things ready. If you don't have any Black Father's Day gifts, hey, I suggest y'all go get Present is the New Normal. It's on the website, roydockery.org. Hit the shop button, and we'll be glad to get you some. Hit that Savage Choice, and you'll get custom colors that are not available on the website, because I like making unique things one-off for the people who support. And that's one of the things I enjoy doing, is making apparel. So appreciate y'all for joining us. God bless you. Y'all have a good month. Have a good week. Do something productive. Go make an impact. Leave an impression that is a lasting imprint, right? Change your environment, because changing our environments, changing our perspective can help change the world. God bless y'all. Peace out.
They keep asking who I am, I just tell them I'm a Christian. Occupation, a description, I just tell them I'm a Christian. Nationality, ethnicity, I tell them I'm a Christian. Keep the hyphens in division.